just saying hello to you. So I think we might want to go ahead and get started with who we have, and then other people join because I think the people who are here are important to be able to hear from Tanisha. And what do you think, Marianne?
I think it's high time. That's what I think.
Well, I think that probably a lot of things. Do you want me to go through um the more mission and the more DEI statement?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. So, welcome everyone to the More DEI Speaker Series. Our special guest tonight is Tanisha Aria, and I'll talk a little bit about her in a minute. People, if anyone has a question, they can raise their hand, and if anyone wants to put anything in the chat, we will be monitoring it and reading it. Moore's mission statement is to organize recovering individuals, families, and friends into a collective voice to educate the public about the value of recovery from alcohol and other addictions. Moore's DEI statement, which they both support each other. Massachusetts Organization for Addiction Recovery is a voice for all people seeking the benefits of recovery. We are committed to doing the work necessary to address the struggles and inequities diverse groups of people face while seeking recovery services. Systematic racism, prejudice, discrimination, and bias have deeply ingrained in this history of the American healthcare system, probably more so now than ever. Um, Moore is committed to work to create a collective voice for those seeking recovery for all people who have been historically underserved, marginalized, and oppressed. So our speaker tonight is this wonderful sister that I actually met when we did the mini BAI in 2022, who's out of Springfield. Tanisha Arena is a Black woman in community leadership as the executive director of Arise for social justice, occupying the world's messiest intersection, the space where race, gender, culture, identity, politics, history, and the law all collide. She is a commissioner on the Massachusetts Commission on the Status of Women, advocating for the needs of women and girls across the Commonwealth. She has a passion for social justice, authentic leadership, and speaking truth to power. She is the host of the award-winning podcast Unapologetic, bringing the hard truths of our social issues to the forefront, connecting past to the present. As a consultant for Growing a New Heart, she trains on holding space, holding affinity, anti-racism, self-education, support groups, and on dialogues across differences of social location, including race and ethnicity, as well as compassionate, accountable conversations for those who work with people who cause harm. She is a founding advisory board member of Call for Change, a free, anonymous, and confidential intimate partner abuse prevention helpline. She teaches for the Sojourner Truth School as well as all focused on teaching all new ways to build connections, facilitate learning, and drive social change. She is a published author, speaker, freelance writer, system disruptor, and change agent. Her best and favorite role is Graham to Penelope, Miss P, Jalen, pronounced Jalen Jr., JJ, and Kylie
Uh,
Jr., KJ.
yeah.
All right. So, Miss Disruptor, welcome to the More DEI Speaker
Thank
Series.
you.
Go
Um,
ahead and disrupt,
thank,
girl.
thank y'all for being here. Yeah, Penelope, JJ, and KJ, those are my littles, and I'll fight you. I'll fight you about them. I'm gonna share my screen. I did put together a PowerPoint, and we'll get through this. I want to be respectful of folks' time. I know this is supposed to be 6 to 7. Um, okay, can folks see my screen? You seeing the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
indeed. Thank
Great.
you. All right, now let me get into this slideshow. Okay, great. So now I can see it and talk to you about these things. I put this presentation together originally for the mini BAI 2 years ago, and I just did it last week, whenever that was. And I've added in some other slides to be here with you today, since we're talking about um, marginalized identities, also historically excluded communities and their experience of substance use. And I also want to throw in a framework um, known as abusive values, right? And how you'll see that, especially if you are a provider, if you're someone that's training folks, like how are we doing this work? Now, what are my intentions? It's not my intention to change your mind. I can't do that. We are going to expand our pool of knowledge and our thinking. And for me, the golden nugget is I never thought about it that way, right? Or I never thought about that. So if you're hearing something that's new, it's like, oh, okay. And I also pray for your doubt. That's how adults learn in dialectic tension. So like if I'm saying something, you're like, yeah, I don't know about this. Like, that's good. That's perfectly normal. Like, and I'll say, I'm not sure or I don't know. That's okay. I also like to laugh. If there's no laughter, there's no learning. And it's okay if we don't answer all of the questions that we'll come up with. Part of this culture that we're in is the urgency, and we got to do everything right now. Even if we make a mess, you just got to do it right now. We don't have to have all the answers. We can actually slow this down. Okay. So ain't you got no home training? Now, as someone of the global majority, like I've heard elders say this thing, and it's basically like knowing how to move and act at home and out in public spaces. I've said this about this country, like America, ain't you got no home training? And it's about not embarrassing your mom. What is acceptable behavior? Speaking when you enter someone's home or a room, especially of the elders. This is important for children, right? You cannot go to someone's grandma house and not say hi. Also, the kids are not allowed to talk back. That's abusive values. I put that in parentheses, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that is. But what it does, there's no voice for children or the right to feelings or anything contradicting parents. And then there's my personal favorite, not favorite. You better go hug so and so. Holidays are coming. This is where kids lose their loss of that they lose their bodily autonomy. They lose consent, right? At the beginnings here, the things that we are expecting kids to do without consideration. And also that cultural space of fix your man a plate. We hide and excuse the perpetrators. You know how your fill in the blank person is, especially when emotional, physical, mental harm has been caused. The pedophile, lots of Black families have an R. Kelly, maybe even a P. Diddy. Like that is something, but we're not going to talk about that. Moms, female caregivers who do not believe daughters who disclose sexual abuse, especially by boyfriends, husbands, that whole space. The daughters are penalized for the disclosure, and they usually face consequences up to and including being kicked out, ostracized, accused of lying, forced to keep the secrets. You bet not tell nobody. The victim blaming and the shaming. This culture is rooted in abusive values, right? And the colonization is rooted in abusive values because in order to colonize a nation, people, something's got to be amiss. Dr. Joy DeGruy talks about in post-traumatic slave syndrome, we have these self-preservation tactics that were never addressed or corrected from life on the plantation, being colonized, oppressed. And this is, again, rooted in our survival, these hypervigilant trauma responses, the way that we over-index, the shame associated with stereotypes around cleanliness, home, personal care. You do not bring attention to your family, negative or positive, right? Even the positive, because we'll downplay that because on plantation, the last thing that you would ever want Massa to know is that your kid was smart, could read, could run really fast, was really strong because they could be hurt, they could be killed, they could be sold off. So nope, we're not doing that. We don't air the family business, the secrets and the shame, the experiences of an addict. Our cultural views on mental health, and I threw in here the church connection, it's also oppressive. Just need Jesus. You're going to pray it away. We will talk about each other instead of helping. The shame that is living in the isolation. We also weaponize substance use. And this is from Benjamin Franklin. So as the past is present. So He said, and indeed, if it be the design of Providence to extirpate these savages in order to make room for cultivators of the earth, the colonizers, it seems not improbable that rum may be the appointed means. It has already annihilated all the tribes who formerly inhabited the seacoast. Ben Franklin is literally saying we can use the liquor to get rid of the indigenous people on the land. Now, what is this cultural abuse of values, right? All colonial derived nations are rooted in abusive values. We have it in our history, it's in our social norms, it's in policy, it's in our practices, it's in our institutions, it's in our systems of control and protection. If you're someone that works in substance use disorder, domestic violence, mental health spaces, this is for your own protection. This is for your own good. But who decided that, right? And when I talk about abusive values, it is a way of being. I'm using this slide with express permission from Growing a New Heart that I train with. We go into these materials in depth, but basically it's if you think you don't have abusive values, I want you to consider how you ask for a representative after you've been on hold for 45 minutes. Right? How do you talk to the automated system? And then when you get on the phone with a representative and they don't speak English the way that you would like, how do you engage with them? You're taking a stance of superiority, and that's abusive value number one. And it allows you to do the other things, right? Now, these impact all of us, right? You can be perpetuating abusive values, you can be surviving abusive values, you could be trying to undo them and promoting equity and respect all in the same day, right? That's why we're so damn tired. All of these things are happening. You're like, why does this even matter? We're supposed to be talking about like queer stuff and, addiction because it's all interconnected. Now, here, white supremacy, by definition, not only to the self-conscious racism of white supremacist hate groups, nope, political, economic, cultural system in which whites overwhelmingly control power, material resources, conscious and unconscious ideas of superiority and entitlement are widespread, right? And relations of white dominance and non-white subordination are daily reenacted across a broad array of institutions and social settings. The institutions that we work in, maybe it's a substance use treatment facility, it's a homeless shelter, any of these spaces, they're operating with this. I've said white supremacy is the Windows 10 of this country. Okay, it's running all the time. You don't have to think about it. It's just doing what it does, right? Just like this computer is going, you don't have to think about it. This is what's happening. So in those spaces where you're looking to provide funding access, where you are giving training, where you're introducing folks in smaller orgs or just startup organizations that want to build and grow and be in community and help folks who are struggling through addiction, what is that rooted in, like their way of being? Are they replicating these very same things that perpetuate the problems? So is this dominance and superiority? Sober people, those not experiencing addiction, treat those who are struggling with through addiction just like racist white people would treat Black people. They just refuse to see it. That stance of superiority is built in. How will you treat someone who is struggling through addiction when you come up with a program? You're like, oh, hey, these are the things that I need you to do to access the services, to come be at the table. Is that rooted in your dominance and superiority, right? And this is a messy intersection, being Black and addicted, because you're still experiencing the racism. If you are a female bodied person, you're experiencing the misogyny. And you also have the stigma of addiction, right? I still spend some time on the Twitters. It's always going to be Twitter. In this space, we talk about a dominance. Heterosexual Black people will treat homosexual trans Black people just like racist white people treat Black people. Actual factual. If you sit in the place of dominance, was like, because I'm cisgendered, I'm better than you, then I could treat you any old kind of which way. I'm straight, so I could treat you however I want because I'm better than you. That's what that looks like. I'm going to tell you a story. So in my day job, I run a social justice organization, and this picture represents the stoop that's outside. This is not the actual front of our building, but we got steps, we have awning. It's one of the only buildings on the street that has cover, right? So protection from the elements. the rain, the sun, things like that. We are across the street from one of the programs of the sheriff's department. We are down the street from the parent information center where parents go to register their kids for school. We are also up the block from the federal courthouse. I can see it from the stoop. But on this stoop, there's a young lady, Lolo, and she would be outside. She would be doing her thing. Sometimes she would be sober, but it was like, hey, this is Lolo. She was really nice. And I learned what Lolo's story is. And I was like, um, yeah, I'd be high all the time too. Because the things that have happened to Lolo are horrible. Lots of systems and institutions have failed her and her children. So she's on the stoop of a rise. Again, she will be high, getting high, buying drugs, whatever the thing is, because where a rise is located, the block is hot. It just is. So where can she go for help? What are the family and cultural norms around mental health, the faith spaces, the treatment facilities, domination versus the streets? Now, I imagine, let's just say, I'm Lolo. And these things have happened to me, and I go home and I go see Big Mom, right? A lot of us were raised by folks other than my mom. So it's like, okay, I'm here, and it's like, Grandma, these things have happened to me. I was thinking I would go to therapy. Like, I've been hearing about this, I've seen some ads. And Grandma said, no, baby, you don't need that. You need to go to the church and pray it away. Pray it to the white Jesus, because that's usually what it winds up being. So she's like, okay, all right. So therapy, we don't do that. So I'm going to church. I go to church looking like this. I'm in the black church, in my black body, doing my black business, whatever. The church ladies, they looking at me sideways. But Grandma said I gotta go to church. I'm in church. So I'm walking by, they're whispering, like, now you know she on that stuff. Okay, I make it to the altar. I leave all my stuff over there, whatever, but I'm not coming back because they're not nice. Like, I don't feel loved, supported, none of that. So now I don't have access to a faith space. I'm not going into a treatment center because they treat me any old kind of which way. They're racist. They want me to do some stuff that doesn't even match my life. They want me to be 100 miles away from where I live, my community. Not all of my community is bad. Hmm. But the dope man, though, he don't judge me. He's nice, you know, gives me something that for a few minutes gives me respite from the things that are eating away at my soul that I need to forget. I told that story to a bunch of providers from BSAS, um, Massachusetts Department, mental health, like all that, and they're mind blown. And I'm like, what do you think is happening outside? Because they want to know, well, why aren't Black folks going into treatment? We not coming because it's rooted in all these things that we could get outside on the street. And the dope man, he don't judge. And representation matters, right? Who are the advocates, the healthcare providers, the substance use disorder treatment professionals, who's offering training, right? Whose stories are being told, who contributes to the design and the protocol, like who's setting all this up, right? Is there cultural competency? Is there humility? Because the impacts of white supremacy and racism on Black and Brown people as it relates to addiction is intense. What was the root cause of the addiction? Because trauma is a gateway drug. I told you horrible things happened to Lolo. Horrible things. What was the root cause of her addiction? She was sexually assaulted. She was impregnated. She bore children by her abuser. Her family kept that. They victimized her, shamed her. Her kids were taken by DCF. And she was left out in the cold. Right? And it's just, again, this representation in this picture here, this was, I think, 2022. It was like, oh my gosh, here's somebody who is drawing pictures in medical textbooks of Black people. And you think about all of the images that you see of medical things, and you ever seen some brown ones? It was like, oh my gosh, that representation matters. Who's sitting at the table? Who's sitting across from you, listening to your story? It matters. Who can meet you in that place, right? Without all that dominance and stuff like that is so deeply ingrained in us and embedded in our systems and institutions. So yeah, what about, right? trauma. If poverty is violence, violence is trauma, racism is a public health crisis. And what happens to those living under the health crisis and the trauma that they experience? Right. And it's the contributor to those who cause harm. They're living under harm daily. And as Leah pointed out when we started, it's taking an examination of not just the black and white. If you are outside of the dominant structure, if you're not cisgendered, if you're not heterosexual, if you are not financially well, if you are disabled, if you are trans, if you are any of those things, you are other, this is not for you. It's not designed for you, not to meet your needs. If you're a single dad, right, as opposed to a single mom, it's not for you. Right. And so now you're trying to navigate through systems and institutions that were never, ever, ever designed to meet you where you are. Substance use to escape your pain because the system doesn't see you. It doesn't recognize your pain. Right. This idea, well, they act like crabs in a barrel. First of all, crabs don't belong in a barrel. Second of all, who put them in there? Right. So the behavior that you're seeing, right? This is an abnormal environment for crabs to be in a barrel. So I'm in an abnormal environment and you're going to see abnormal behavior because I don't belong here. Human beings do not belong in the spaces of extreme poverty and violence and trauma day after day after day. So, yeah, it's kind of why it's like the Hunger Games outside and why people are struggling through their addiction. And the more layers that you throw on top of it, right? So my mental health is jacked up. Of course, because I can't be who I am. I don't have spaces to be, right? Rates of suicide are 4 times greater for LGBT youth who are questioning than heterosexual youth. LGBTQIA plus adults, older adults, face unique challenges, including the combination of anti-LGBTQ stigma and ageism. Imagine being a 55 plus queer couple. You're trying to find a place to live. The 55 plus communities were never designed with you in mind. Estate planning was never designed with you in mind. Any of these things, not designed with you in mind. 31% of older LGBTQ adults report depressive symptoms. You don't have community. Maybe you don't have children. Those connections don't exist. Your birth family may have sent you packing like we don't want nothing to do with you. 39% report serious thoughts of taking their own lives. Right? And then what is accessible to folks? And again, what is out here on the internet? My algorithm is pretty dope. Right? And this space, like we have lots of spaces that are supposed to be healing, but they actually are harmful to lots of folks. If you can, think that depression is a spirit, you can work with that. I respectfully request that you view it as a spirit the same way you view cancer as a spirit. Just like you pray and you go to chemotherapy and radiation, you can pray and see a therapist. Pray and be on medication. Like I had a pastor who was like, listen, you need Jesus, therapy, and the medication if they tell you. Like that's real. It's not faith or therapy. It's both faith and therapy, right? And that's just throwing in the faith space in the layer of queer identity and mental health and your ability to access spaces that would be supportive and helpful as you're struggling through addiction or maybe preventing you from going down the pathway of addiction. The substance use, there's limited research. And I'm not surprised about the limited research because when we're looking for data, and again, does anybody see you in all of the intersections? Well, we're looking to see how the Black folks are doing. Okay, well, we're looking for the gay folks and how they're doing. But we don't live single issue lives. Like if I'm Black and gay, where do you catch me in the data? So you get one or the other. It's not a lot, right? But LGB individuals, both within and across racial ethnic minority groups, it's limited. Right? The disparities were present for LGB women across racial ethnic groups, and they were larger among Black and Hispanic LGB women compared with white LGB women. There were few disparities observed among racial and ethnic minority gay and bisexual men. And I will point out the T is missing here because trans as identity, Black trans women experience the highest and ugliest horrific rates of violence. It's like violence 3.0, right? the level of substance use, depression, mental health disorders, which is your mental health disorder because there's legit something wrong with you or because you're trying to navigate in systems and institutions that would kill you? Those are the things that I would like for people in this space to think about in doing this work, how you show up when you're designing programs, your sphere of influence. Can you talk to your manager, in your residential program, like wherever you go, the small community-based organizations that have to contort and twist to get funding, right? But there are other ways of doing this, but you got to know what's behind the scenes, what's happening for folks. And then when you're designing stuff, like, why aren't they coming? Because there are lots of spaces, no, we're not going because they're not safe. They're not emotionally safe. They're not physically safe. They're not mentally safe. They replicate the very harm that they're supposed to help with. But that's on that spectrum, right? It's in our history, it's in our policy, it is societally acceptable, it's in our systems of control and protection. So I want to leave some time for Q&A, but again, those names, why do I do this? So there's Penelope, there's JJ. They are both about to turn 3 in January and February, and there's baby KJ, that's Penelope's little brother. He was born in May. What is today? He'll be 6 months old tomorrow. So this is what their gram does. So I want to make sure, even on my most exhausted, tired, get somebody else to do it because Black women is over it day. Their grandma's out here trying to make this world better. So that's why I do this. And questions, answers, thoughts, the whole thing. And yeah, and I know that's a lot. So they'll lay it on me. I will say
So
good things.
first, if you could stop sharing your screen so we can see everybody, that would be great. And also, thank you so much, Tanisha. That was, I actually have never seen your entire presentation. So for me, that really was a wonderful experience in understanding, and gave me a lot of clarity, around the importance of having you at the table, and doing this presentation today. When we started, we because the confusion and everything, I didn't introduce everybody that or have everybody introduce themselves that's here. So I'm going to go back now, Tanisha, if you don't mind for a second, and I'll start with Marianne, and then we'll go to Noel, and then to Denise, and to Hannah and Marshall and Zakia. If everybody could just introduce yourself, and if at that time you have a question, then it would be that would be an opportune time for you to do that. Thank you.
Tanisha, welcome. It's been a great presentation. And I am Marianne Frangulis, and I am person in long-term recovery, and I am the current executive director until January.
Do you have any questions, Marianne?
Oh, okay. All right. I, I, can you tell me what inspired you to move in this direction?
Same what you mean in the substance use, like
Substance use,
uh
gender, support,
well,
family.
there's lived experience. Like, so I'm not someone with lived experience directly of substance use. I can tell you as a kid, I remember my uncle struggling through addiction as my grandparents passed away and what that looked like, the erosion in my family to my mom, my aunts, and my uncles, like in that way, like who wound up moving away, who, like got blamed, like how those spaces were navigated. They didn't have the tools. And I can reflect on that now, like as an adult, like, oh, they were young dealing with some heavy stuff. Because it's when you're a kid, you don't think about how old or young your people are. And in hindsight, I'm like, when my grandparents died, like my youngest uncle was like 20, like losing your parent, like so, and what was happening at the time and whatever, how you going to take care of yourself? Do you have the support? So there's that in my lived experience, the closest I've ever been. Um, when I started training with Growing a New Heart, it put me in lots of other spaces that were connected to my work at Arise. So Arise is a social justice organization that focuses on the rights of poor and low income folks around housing and homelessness and economic justice and the environment. And I spend more time talking about the built environment. So I'm like, listen, do I look like I hug trees? No, Black people got other things to worry about, like bullets and cops and, whatever. So let's talk about the built environment. So when we were in these training spaces talking to providers, the train B-size folks, the substance use disorder, all that. I'm like, let me tell you what I see outside my office window in a community that is historically excluded, harmed, surveilled. Folks are struggling with addiction. And these are the things that are happening in the community that contribute to why someone would turn to substances. And then here's Lolo on my stoop who has this story. And I was like, so I'd be high as the kite every day because this I don't want to remember. And in these spaces where you're creating programs, we want people to harm reduction, right? How much harm do we cause in our harm reduction? A lot. And naming that, like, so in this work that I do at a ride, it's like I'm the voice in spaces, the table flipper, the system disruptor. Like, hey, you think you're doing something great, magical, wonderful? You're actually harming people. And it looks like this. And so we navigate in these frameworks like the abuse of values, the values of equity and respect, that culture, the colonial derived nations, like there's a lot in that. And it's like, okay, I had some personal things happen to me in terms of my lesbian identity, right? And it's like, okay, I'm out here, the dating pool can be toxic sludge. And it's for a number of reasons, people's internalized stuff, like all the things that you experience, because we all got socialized the same, right? Like you could be the young kid in church and you're hearing the message from the pulpit, like how you're going to hell and you're horrible and whatever. And it's like, but I'm human and I'm here and like I just want to love somebody. And that seems so like far-fetched. And so you're an adult, you're out in space or whatever, and I met somebody and it was great until it got to the space of like, I can't I can't tell my dad. And I'm just like, wait, what? We grown, like buy four tires at the same time, pay bills, like grown, what you mean? And that went the way that it needed to go. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna put my toe in this toxic sludge some more, whatever. And I met somebody else. And she says, my dad is a pastor. And it was the same thing. And I was like, okay, this is some Black people shit. Like, because here's and I'm like, huh? So then I started asking people in my community who are more femme presenting or whatever, like, how does this work for you? And like, because you could pass. And here's this language that is civil rights connected, also queer connected. Like these things go together. Like, why would you need to pass? Like, nobody would look at you, right? And I'm like, nobody ever asked me if I was gay. They just like, she is. And here I've got these friends, they could pass it straight. And it's like, well, how do you show up with all this courage and just, this is me. And one of my friends, she was like, my mom's still like, when you get married one day, and she had been with her partner for 3 years. And it's like, Ma, there ain't gonna be no wedding to this man, but you keep whatever. And so it was just, let's examine this. If I use the lens of the abusive values, how does this show up at church, Black church specifically? And it was like you could lay them right on top, right? The ideology of the church in that space with white supremacy and that culture of dominance and superiority, it's like they fit just we just replicated it, right? And when there's another presentation that I have that talks about this more in depth, and it was like local pastor Talbert Swan, who I love, right, had preached about white evangelicals and they sit back and do nothing about the extrajudicial killings of Black people and this and that, whatever, and this thing about the environment and like you cannot love God and then destroy something that God has created. And I was like, oh my God, it writes itself. This is beautiful. So he preached that like on the Sunday, and my presentation was on the Tuesday. And it's like, but when you go into church, because like Black church folks treat gay folks the way racist white folks treat Black folks. And it's like nobody wants to talk about that. And but we're going to talk about that because this has now hit my life. Because I'm like, I'm Black. I've been Black my entire life. I know how to manage racist white folks. I'm like, that's old hat. But hitting the wall of homophobia, I was beside myself. I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, what? So I did the only thing that I know how to do. Like it became academic. Like, I'm gonna do a presentation. I'm gonna do some research and we're gonna talk about this. And it just fit. And it's you could take this dominance and superiority because it's in everything that we do. So it's like, okay, it's in the church. I mean, it stemmed from the church. There's some documents. It's in housing policy, it's in drug policy, it's in economic policy, it's in all of the things. So my work has become about getting people to see from where you are in your organization. Oh, shoot, it's here too. This is what it looks like. And so now I can see it for what it is. I can start to move different because we can beat the same. I'm like, and I watched, there's a film called King in the Wilderness. Dr. King in 1965 at Ebenezer Baptist Church said there were three things that were plaguing this country. It was racism, militarism, and exploitation of the poor. It is 2024. You tell me what's different. So I'm like, clearly, marching and this and that and beating the drum, it's not working because we did this in 1965, we did this in the 70s, we did this in the 80s. We like there's a different way. You have to know the rules to the game, this operating system. Like, raise your hand if you play spades, right? You know the rules. Big joker, little joker. Don't cut your partner, count your books. You have to understand the rules of what's happening here. And if you're someone in a position of authority, you a manager, the director, you run in a treatment center, you run a housing place, how are you doing that? If you have influence in carceral thing, like do you need it to be a carceral thing? Why is it a carceral thing? Looking at this war on drugs, which really wasn't a war on drugs, like examining that, like this was a war on poverty, on black people, and it's like why I talk about black people stuff because I'm black. Hello, anti-blackness is global, and it's at the root of all of this domination. The documents from the church literally say the African race is divinely inferior, and their place is in servitude, in perpetuity, forever. So if you have that as doctrine, as the blueprint, everything that you build has that. Everything. Even when you think it ain't there, it's like high fructose corn syrup. It's like, oh my God, it's in that too. If you search your organization, if you think about how who gets in trouble for an infraction, who gets kicked out, who gets 50, 11 chances to prove them, who gets to be a felon and be the president, Lord Jesus. Anyway, who gets the benefit of whose doubt? Who gets to, we're going to try again. We're going to try again. Who gets to keep their kids? Who gets their kids taken? Who gets them back expeditiously? Who does not go to jail? There's a blueprint for that. In addiction treatment, you know the one that burns me? Opioids, right? Because when it was about Chad and Thad and Becky and whatever, it's a health crisis. But when it was people that looked like me, when it was Tasha and Tyrone and them struggling with crack, we got to put everybody in jail.
Mhm.
I wonder what's different. Those are the things. That's the history. You need to know that so that you don't go repeating it in all the things that you do in your quest to be better, to help people, right? There's prevention, there's recovery. What are you asking people to do in their recovery? Shipping people far, far away from their systems of support, that's not helpful. But we know better than you. It's for your own good. Is it though? Is it though? And who decided that? So yeah, I'd be in the space and people be big mad. And I'm like, but I said what I said, and you're gonna go huff and puff. But if you go look, it's right there. I'm not lying to you. You can ask Google, Siri, or Alexa, it's right there. So
Absolutely.
Mrs. Akishi, like, oh, I was in your thing about the house, and that's I'm like, it's in everything. And if you think, no, it's not over there, I could find it.
Mhm.
So that's how I got there. And like this has turned me into a lover of history in some interesting ways because I'm like, oh, we've been at this for a long time. None of this is new. How does it? Ain't nothing new under the sun.
Wow.
So
Thank you. That's a very thorough answer, and I think maybe it may have answered somebody else's question, but um, again, we're going to go back to people introducing themselves, their role, and if you have any questions, Noel.
Good evening, Tanisha. My name is Noel Sierra. First and foremost, I appreciate everything you're sharing. Some great insight tonight. I definitely agree with, some of the insight that you shared with the church. I do believe that we have failed people. We have failed to show the love that we're supposed to show, and therefore it's caused more damage than good. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for sharing all that you have shared. I identify as a Latino man in long-term recovery. I've been with MOAR for the last 5 years, and I will be stepping in as director of MOAR when Marianne retires.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Any questions,
Thank you.
Noel?
No, I don't have any questions. I just sat listening intently. That's it's a good insight.
Thank you. Denise?
Hi, Tanisha. My name is Denise. I am the Assistant Program Director for MOAR. I am also a woman in long-term recovery, woman of color. And it was really good to hear you, how you broke everything down, just very thorough, thought-provoking. Um, just yeah what something Lance described you as a shaker, bean shaker, or whatever that was, and boy oh boy did you shake.
Disruptor.
Yep.
Yes,
I was coming out
disruptor.
the tables. I'm
That's
like,
it, the disruptor. I love it. I love it. Because you also said something about learning in the very beginning. How do we learn? And it's okay to not agree with everything, but then how do you turn that into a learning experience? I don't have to agree with everything you say, but there's things that you talked about that I was just like blown away because there's a whole lot of things going on, and it's just gonna continue right now with the election, which everyone is talking about, and I hate to talk about it, but it is. Um, but I was interested in asking one question about the transgender community because you said the rate of how or percentage of how many people are actually like either committing suicide or being victims of violence based off of just that you know choice. So how often is that happening across the country per se? I'm pretty sure it's happening a lot in the inner cities, but do you have any like numbers or
let me see. So in a previous life, I was the Western Mass advocate for the violence recovery program of Fenway Health. And I was on the governance board for the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs, and they put out a report every year. It looks like the most recent one was 2022. So let's see, it's a fact sheet. Housing vouchers, know your rights. The numbers are always higher for trans folks in terms of bullying, harm, like, and just that is caused. And like I said,
no?
it's not just, oh, they got in a fight. It's extreme violence.
No.
There's been an uptick, or there was an uptick, the 2016 election, the rhetoric, the things that get said. I mean, I'll even throw Dave Chappelle in this, like after his specials, there was an uptick in the violence. It's not just words that are said, it's basically, it's remember in that abusive values to equity and respect, right? Our social norms where you can have a platform and you're normalizing this behavior to attack someone else because of their sexual orientation, their expression of that. So let me see. How do I get you some numbers? What is it in 2022? Resources, reports. Okay, 2017.
I was also thinking about how hard it must be. Well, I already know it is when it comes to treatment because a lot of people have to learn through trial and error when people present for treatment, when they present for detox, when they present for, services that
Right.
often becomes a challenge.
Because again, the systems are not designed for what you need. So when I went to the BAI Friday, I was on a shared panel with two other participants, one who happened to be a Black trans woman. And she told her story, and it was phenomenal. And the pieces of that story about being needing to go to crisis intervention and not being told about that and being in that space and not having access to basic things that would affirm her identity, right? So having a razor to shave, facial hair, being able to properly groom herself, just not there because in that space of like, well, hey, we have somebody that's coming in, they're having a mental health crisis. We're not thinking about a trans person and like they might actually need these things as opposed to a cisgender person, just not there. And the absence of that is violence. It is. Um, Out in the street, someone seeing you and perpetrating violence against you because of their perceptions. And this is societally okay. Short example, not specifically trans, but just if you're a female bodied person having somebody tweet like, hey, your body, my choice, that's violence, right? That's very harmful. And it's one person said it and like 50,000 people liked it and reshared it. Like that is violence. If you walk this planet as a uterus bearing person perceived as the feminine, which the misogyny, right? Bell Hooks said that misogyny was worse than racism. And for a Black woman to tell you the hatred of women is worse than the racism, she's saying something. The hatred of things feminine, because if you are a male bodied human and you espouse traits that we go to the feminine, you are in danger too, because we don't like that. This country hates women and Black people.
Oh,
Don't be both. Like, so let me see. I just pulled this report and see if I can actually get you a number. The last one that they did was in 2017, and I suspect because in the years after, funding changes, there was COVID, so they had a COVID report.
mhm.
Let me see. In 2017, anti-LGBTQ homicides since 2012, there were 52. Doesn't seem like a lot, but if you're talking about what percentage of the population and you have this number, like there was a jump. In 2016, there were 28. The following year, there were 52. What
Wow.
happened between 16 and 17?
Mm-hmm.
It's a wacky election, right? Let's see. Key findings, homicides, these victims of these hate violence related homicides have overwhelmingly been trans women and queer, bi, or gay cis men.
Gotcha.
So, I think I could pop this in the chat and y'all could look through it at your leisure, like download it. But yeah, the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs, they put out this data,
Okay.
and I just know that because I was in that space and got to talk about these things. And it's also the
Wonderful.
intersection. So 22 of those 52 homicides were trans women of color.
Wow.
So that's what that looks like. And there's a I don't want to call it a game, but there's an activity that we used to do called the Cleo activity. And Cleo was a Black trans woman. And we would set up these cards at different stations. And it was like one of those books where it's like, if you want the character to do this, turn to page 5. If you want them to do this, turn to page 12. So you would get your scenario. This is where Cleo is. And if you wanted her to go try to get help from the police, you would go over to station 1. If you wanted her to go talk to a friend, you go to station 5. Ultimately, what participants would discover was that it did not matter which place Cleo went to. She was not able to access any of the help and support that we are used to as cisgendered people. Because the cops were no help. I was like, I'm not going there because I'm afraid of them because they cause harm. My friend was like, girl, maybe you should just stay with him. The pastor was like, you're an abomination. Like, it just didn't work. Like all of those spaces where someone else experiencing domestic violence, substance use,
Mm.
I can't access those pathways. So
Thank you.
you're
Thank
welcome.
you for that.
Hannah?
Hi, Tanisha. Thank you so much for talking and speaking tonight. Um, I guess I don't know how to ask this without sounding dumb and privileged, but as a white female, uh, how can we best like support? Like, because I was like snapping my hands over here the whole time. Like, I agree with everything. How do women like me who don't know the trauma and don't know the experience, how do we best show up and reduce the amount of harm when we're trying to do good for folks?
Okay.
I don't
I
know if
got
that.
you. I mean, on a day like today, where I'm not gonna lie, my energy has been, as a Black woman, like we didn't try to go get somebody else to do it. But I appreciate, like,
Mhm,
this is a space. I would say it's a few things. One, be quiet. Listen, right? When the people who have been harmed are trying to tell you what those experiences have been,
mhm,
don't, "Well, what about, I don't know, and not, no, just listen." I would say do lots of reading, the hard things. Like I just finished listening to the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. It's 26 hours long, but it's so, oh my gosh. I would say they are her property. I got on my desk right here. I love Michael Harriot, Black AF History. You can't see because, wait, there you go. Right? Black AF History. There's a podcast called Drapetomaniacs where it's connected to this. Read everything, go gather information as much as you can, because they wrote it down. They did. So it's there.
mhm,
Read those books. Sit in that discomfort. Like right now, we are in a place where I 57% of white women voted for a rapist.
mhm,
And that's uncomfortable. And it's like, well, how do I make Black women know that I'm safe to be around? Like, I don't want your pink hat. I don't want your bracelet. I don't want none of that. Like, you had one job.
yeah,
Now you're gonna have to sit and be uncomfortable. Like,
mhm,
because no, there's no absolution. Like, I ain't got nothing for you. Read, listen, follow the movement leaders who already been in that space, those small orgs, Black, queer, the people who are closest to the pain that have been having to organize to stay alive. And then the other thing that you got to do, go and get your people. Okay? White woman, privilege, your tears to get weaponized. No, 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 no. Go and get your people. Literally collect them up, tell them the things. This ain't right. This is how we show up. It's not good. You are harming Black and brown people.
mhm,
Call that out and stand in front of. Say the thing in the meeting, right? Not, in the meeting that was so wrong. And I want you to know, say it in the meeting.
mhm,
If there are ideas that are being shared by Black and brown folks, amplify them. And then when you got the white women's, whoever, taking chunks out of it, say, wait a minute. Tanisha was giving us this amazing idea. Tanisha was speaking. Like, be the redirector. Use your privilege for good. Put yourself on the line the way Black and brown organizers have put themselves on the line since forever for the comfort and the safety, right? So I think that's three good ones, right? Educate yourself, be quiet, listen, learn, and speak up.
mhm,
Put yourself out there. That's how we know that you're safe. Be like, every time Hannah get in a space, Hannah's about that life. Hannah will fight you. That's the energy that we need.
mhm.
Don't need a bracelet. Don't need a hat. I'm watching what you're doing, right? Decentering yourself and, well, I feel so bad, and you know that I'm not like that if you knew me. No, no, no. Collect up your people. Use your privilege for good, right? So I'm them three. So that's not a bad question. I'm gonna give you that labor because we
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. We're getting ready to run out of time, but I do want to go to Marshall and then to Kia, and then we can close.
Tanisha, thank you so much. Yeah, that slideshow was very informative, and it was really well done. And I agree with you on a lot of things. This country has done a lot of harm over the years, especially you know, white males, which I happen to be. But
won't get your
you're
people.
you're right about that. But yeah, I'm the new Boston regional coordinator for MOAR, and I'm a big connector, and I'm just trying to figure out ways that I can help everybody around here. So I'm really happy to meet you. And I just want to thank you so much. You really shared a lot today, and I appreciate it. It's really informative.
Welcome.
Thank you. Zakia?
But you gotta unmute. Gotta unmute.
Unmute, Zakia. You're muted. Unmute yourself, Zakia. You know you're muted. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Let's see. Yeah, we can't.
Can we unmute her?
Let's see. Can we? Where are we?
Whoever the host is.
I'm
Let's
trying
see.
to ask her to unmute, but it's not working.
No, I can't do
Zakia,
it.
you're still muted over there.
She
The
knows.
host can do it.
Ask to unmute.
No, whoever the host is, the participants in that list,
Yeah, Hannah's the host, so she's trying to ask her to
It says
unmute.
ask to unmute, but it won't let me
it
force
won't let
unmute.
you do it.
Um,
It
Dang.
says ask.
Huh.
I can mute people, I just can't unmute.
Unmute them.
oh, wow.
Allow participants to unmute themselves. Can you do it now? Did you hit a button?
Is it your computer?
It's
It's your computer.
our computer. Yeah.
It's you. Oh, it's you.
Bummer.
We're reading your lips pretty good.
Feels like charades.
Put it in the chat. Oh, that's so awful. On the audio, you got to pick them up.
Zakia, can you call my phone? And I can put you on speaker. And then I will mute myself. Oh no, I can't mute myself. Oh, let's see how this works. Eek.
Put the phone by the speaker. We'll figure it out.
Okay. Hello?
I have too many things open.
Is it down the bottom? Did your bar go away?
You know, let me walk away from this computer so I don't echo to y'all. Sorry.
It might be me.
No, I got this fabulous Mac, but I forgot how to use it.
Oh,
and
I
I made the
understand
screen
that.
disappear. Listen, I'm echoing, so I'm gonna get off real quick. I loved the presentation. I was a little late, but the next step for me would to be develop a way to integrate into all treatment programs an assessment of how we treat each other. And then from there, those listening sessions that Tanisha is talking about, so we learn how to integrate on a daily basis anti-bias training for everybody, the program participants, the staff, the board, everybody. Now I'm gonna stop echoing in y'all's ear. It was a wonderful presentation, and thank you.
Thank you. Tanisha, we obviously, all still have a lot of work to do. We're working on a lot of projects that are actually opening up two new residential programs, one in Springfield and one in Boston, that is being designed by MBAC and all the folks that are involved with the team. Many of them were at the event of the BAI, and these are all things that we're looking at, and that's the purpose of the BAI was to have all of these different workshops and people speaking, because these are all things that we have to look at as we move forward in our work for Impact, but also in the work that I'm doing for MOAR. in taking a look at what are we missing. So we wanted to have you a while ago, and for some reason we couldn't get in contact with you, but I would love to invite you back for another platform, and we'll figure out what that looks like, because I think there are a lot more people that need to hear you. That may even involve a training. But I just want to thank you again, and I'll let Mary Ann close.
I want to thank you so much. You really gave an open and honest, uh, disclosure and an opportunity to really think through, and over any kind of, for lack of better words, I guess it's like oppression. And thank you for the opportunity to think about the changes we need to make. So thank you.
Great. All right, everyone.